He mocked his barren wife at his own wedding, until she walked in with triplets and a fortune he could never match. In the heart of Lagos, where glass towers kissed the clouds and wealth whispered through every corner, Damian Obadiki had built an empire. His name alone could open doors, close deals, and silence rooms. But there was one door he couldn't open, the door to fatherhood. And for that, he blamed the woman who had stood by him through every struggle, every sleepless night, every failed venture that later became gold. Lilian Obadike was not the kind of woman Lagos celebrated. She didn't wear designer labels or post her life on social media. She prayed more than she partied, cooked more than she complained, and loved more than she demanded. For 7 years, she had been Damian's wife. For 7 years, she had endured whispers at family gatherings, pitying glances at church, and questions that cut deeper than any knife. Still no children. Have you tried traditional medicine? Maybe you should let him take a second wife. Every doctor's appointment ended the same way. The results always came back clear. Lilian was fine, perfectly healthy. The delay, they said, was unexplainable. Medical mystery, divine timing. But in a society where a woman's worth was measured by the children she bore, explanations didn't matter. Blame did, and it always landed on her. Damian's mother, Mama Damian, made sure of that. A woman with a sharp tongue and sharper opinions, she never missed an opportunity to remind her son that he was wasting his prime years on a woman who couldn't give him heirs. His friends, wealthy men with multiple children and even more mistresses, echoed the sentiment over glasses of aged whiskey in private clubs. Brother, she's beautiful, yes, but what is beauty without fruit? A tree that doesn't bear fruit is only good for firewood. Slowly, like rust eating through iron, their words began to change Damian. He started coming home late, speaking less, touching her even less. The man who once held her hand during church service now sat 3 seats away. The man who once called her his backbone now looked at her like she was a burden he couldn't shake off. Then came their 7th wedding anniversary. Lilian had planned everything herself, a small, elegant dinner at their home with close friends and family. She wore a burgundy dress he once said made her look like royalty. She cooked his favorite meals. She even baked a cake, though baking was never her strength. She wanted to remind him of the love they once shared before the silence, before the coldness, before the world convinced him she was broken. The guests arrived. Laughter filled the dining room. Mama Damian sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of thinly veiled disappointment. Damian's friends clinked glasses and told exaggerated stories about business victories. Lilian smiled through it all, serving, refilling glasses, pretending not to hear the whispered comments about her childlessness. Then Damian stood. He raised his glass. The room fell silent. Lilian's heart swelled with hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would say something kind. Maybe tonight would be the turning point. To 7 years, Damian began, his voice loud and steady. He looked around the room, but not at her. 7 years of building an empire, 7 years of fighting battles, 7 years of... He paused, and the pause was cruel. Emptiness. The word hung in the air like smoke. Someone coughed. Another shifted uncomfortably. But Damian's friends, those vipers in designer suits, they laughed. They raised their glasses and drank to his words. Mama Damian smiled, nodding her approval. Lilian felt her soul crack. She excused herself quietly, retreating to the kitchen where she gripped the edge of the counter and wept silently into her palms. That night she realized something terrible. The man she loved had already left her. His body was still there, but his heart had moved on. The divorce papers came 3 months later. No warning, no conversation, just a manila envelope delivered by a courier who wouldn't meet her eyes. The grounds: irreconcilable differences and failure to fulfill marital obligations. In simpler terms, she was barren and he was done waiting. The day she moved out, Mama Damian stood at the gate, arms folded, watching with satisfaction. "You're a nice girl," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But my son needs a woman who can give him children, not a decorative wife." Lilian said nothing. She had no words left. She climbed into the taxi with 2 suitcases and a shattered heart, leaving behind the mansion, the life, the man she had prayed for every single night. But the cruelty didn't end there. 6 months later, an invitation arrived at her friend Amar's house, where Lilian was temporarily staying. It was gold embossed, expensive, elegant, a wedding invitation. Damian Obadiki and Nkechi Okafor request the honor of your presence. Inside, tucked between the elegant folds, was a handwritten note in Damian's unmistakable scrawl. You can come see what a real wife looks like. Lilian held that note for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred. Amara found her sitting on the floor staring at nothing. He wants to destroy you, Amara said quietly, but only if you let him. That night, Lilian made a decision. She would not crumble. She would not beg. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She would rise, not for revenge, but for herself. Lilian folded the wedding invitation carefully and placed it in a drawer she rarely opened. She wouldn't burn it. She wouldn't tear it apart in anger. She would simply let it exist as a reminder of the man who once loved her and the man he had become. Amara watched her friend with quiet admiration. What will you do now? She asked. Lilian looked out the window at the Port Harcourt skyline, a city she barely knew but had chosen specifically because it wasn't Lagos, because it didn't hold memories of Damian on every corner. I'll start again, she said simply, from the beginning. Starting again meant returning to the basics. Lilian had always been an exceptional cook. It was one of the things Damian's friends had praised during better times. Your wife's jollof rice can make a man confess his sins, one had joked. She remembered that now, and she remembered something her grandmother had once told her. A woman with skill in her hands will never go hungry. With the little money she had saved and a small loan from Amara, Lilian began making spice blends in her tiny kitchen. She started with suya spice, then curry blends, then her signature mix she called Osenwanyi, woman's pepper. She packaged them in simple jars with handwritten labels and sold them at the local market on weekends. The first month, she made barely enough to cover transportation. The second month, a food blogger stumbled upon her stall and posted about the hidden gem with flavors that could wake up your ancestors. The post went viral locally. Orders began flooding in. By the third month, Lilian had moved from the market to online sales. By the sixth month, she had hired 3 women from her church to help with production. She named her business Lily's Taste of Home, and she poured into it every ounce of pain, every silent prayer, every tear she had shed. The business became her child, her purpose, her redemption. She wasn't just selling spices. She was selling hope in small glass jars. During one of her supplier meetings at a local warehouse, she met Mr. Henry Ease. He was a widower in his early 40s, a businessman who supplied organic ingredients to restaurants across the South-South region. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years prior and carried his grief quietly, like a coat he couldn't take off. Their first conversation was about logistics and pricing. Their second was about faith and perseverance. Their third was about loss and learning to live again. Henry didn't rush her. He didn't ask invasive questions about her past. He simply showed up at church, at business events, at moments when she needed a friend more than a savior. One evening, after a particularly successful product launch, Henry took her to a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. I'm not asking you to forget your pain, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm asking if you'd let me walk beside you while you heal. Lilian cried that night, not from sadness, but from relief. Relief that kindness still existed. Relief that not all men measured a woman's value by her womb. Relief that God hadn't forgotten her after all. Their relationship grew slowly, naturally, like a garden tended with patience. 6 months later, Henry proposed with a simple gold band and a promise. I will love you for who you are, not for what you can give me. They married quietly at a small chapel with only Amara and a handful of close friends present. No gold decorations, no celebrities, no social media announcements, just 2 wounded souls choosing to believe in love again. Then came the miracle. 3 months after their wedding, Lilian began feeling unusually tired. She dismissed it as stress from expanding her business into 3 new states. But when the fatigue persisted, Amara dragged her to the hospital. The doctor returned with a smile that could light up a room. "Congratulations, Mrs. Ease. You're pregnant with triplets." Lilian fainted. When she woke up, Henry was holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. "3," he kept whispering. "God gave us 3. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. 7 years of trying with Damian had yielded nothing but blame and shame. 3 months with Henry, and her womb had become a garden of abundance. The pregnancy was smooth, almost miraculous. Lilian glowed. Her business continued to thrive, now managed by a small team while she prepared for motherhood. Henry converted an entire room into a nursery, painting it himself in soft yellows and greens. Amara threw a baby shower that felt more like a Thanksgiving service. When the boys arrived, identical, healthy, beautiful, Lilian held them and finally understood what her grandmother meant when she said, "God's delays are not God's denials." She named them Chimamanda, Chibuike, and Chukwuebuka. God is beautiful, God is strength, God is great. Each name was a testimony. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Damian was preparing for his own celebration. His engagement to Nkechi had been the society event of the year. She was everything Lilian wasn't. Loud, flashy, connected to old money, and very vocal about her ability to give him the heirs he deserved. Mama Damian approved wholeheartedly. His friends congratulated him for finally making a wise choice. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday at Echo Hotel, the kind of venue that cost more to book than most people earned in a year. Damian spared no expense. Ice sculptures, international DJs, a guest list that read like a Forbes magazine feature. He wanted the world to see that he had moved on, moved up, and moved forward. If this moment touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more billionaire stories that teach what money can't buy. 3 days before the wedding, Lilian received a phone call from an old church member in Lagos. "Sister Lilian, I saw the wedding announcement. That man, after everything he did to you, will you go?" Lilian looked at her 3 sons sleeping peacefully in their crib, at Henry reading a business magazine in the corner, at the life she had built from ruins. She smiled. "Yes," she said quietly, "I think I will." The morning of Damian's wedding arrived with all the pomp Lagos could muster. Echo Hotel gleamed like a jewel on the Atlantic coast, its grand ballroom transformed into something between a royal palace and a Hollywood set. Gold drapes cascaded from 30-foot ceilings. Crystal chandeliers caught the light and scattered it like diamonds across marble floors. White roses imported from Ecuador filled every corner, their fragrance almost intoxicating. Outside, luxury cars lined the driveway. Bentleys, Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, each one more ostentatious than the last. Damian stood near the entrance in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, greeting guests with the confidence of a man who had conquered his demons and claimed his prize. Nkechi had already made 3 costume changes before the ceremony even began, each dress more elaborate than the previous, each entrance designed for maximum social media impact. Photographers swarmed like bees, capturing every moment for blogs and gossip columns. Mama Damian held court at a reserved table, draped in expensive aso-oke, receiving compliments and admiration from guests who praised her for finally getting her son a proper wife. Damian's friends, those same men who had encouraged his cruelty toward Lilian, raised glasses of champagne and made jokes about finally seeing the Obidik dynasty begin. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Nkechi walked down the aisle like she was on a Paris runway, her dress trailing behind her for what seemed like miles. Damian's smile was wide, confident, victorious. The pastor's voice boomed through speakers, talking about fruitfulness and multiplication, covenant and legacy. Every word felt like a pointed reminder of what Lilian had supposedly failed to provide. After the vows, the reception began. That's when Damian truly came alive. He took the microphone during the toast, his voice amplified across the ballroom. "Today, I'm not just marrying a woman," he announced, chest puffed with pride. "I'm securing my future. I'm building a legacy. I'm finally complete." The applause was thunderous. Glasses clinked. Someone started chanting, "Speech! Speech!" Nkechi beamed beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, her engagement ring catching the light like a small sun. Damian continued, emboldened by the attention. "Some people said I gave up too quickly on my first marriage, but I know better. Sometimes you have to cut off dead branches so new ones can grow. Sometimes—" He never finished that sentence. The ballroom doors opened, and the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes fell over the room. Every head turned. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Even the DJ's music seemed to fade into nothing. A white Rolls-Royce Phantom had pulled up outside, its presence commanding attention even among the sea of luxury vehicles. The driver opened the rear door, and out stepped Lilian. She wore a gold gown that seemed to have been woven from sunset itself, elegant, understated, yet impossible to ignore. Her hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face. She wore minimal jewelry, just a simple gold necklace and matching earrings. But she glowed with something no accessory could provide: confidence, peace, victory earned through suffering. But it wasn't Lilian alone that stopped hearts. On either side of her, holding her hands, were two identical boys in miniature tuxedos. Behind them, Henry carried the third, all three children mirror images of each other. Round faces, bright eyes, matching bow ties. Triplets. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. "Is that Lilian? Those children? Are they? How old are those boys? Didn't Damian say she was barren? Oh my God, look at her. She's glowing." Lilian walked through that ballroom like Moses through the Red Sea. Guests parted instinctively, creating a path. Camera phones appeared from every direction, but she didn't acknowledge them. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, on the high table where Damian sat frozen, his confident smile now a mask of shock. Nchi's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching horror. Mama Damian's mouth fell open, her wrapper suddenly looking less regal and more like a costume. Lilian reached the high table and stopped. The entire ballroom held its breath. She reached into her small clutch and pulled out the gold-embossed wedding invitation, the same one that had contained that cruel handwritten note. She placed it gently on the table in front of Damian. "Congratulations," she said, her voice soft but clear enough to carry in the absolute silence. "I came to return your invitation. You were right. I came to see what a real wife looks like." She gestured to her sons, to Henry standing protectively nearby, to the life that radiated from her like light. "And I found her, in the mirror, every single day." Damian's face had gone pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in years, the great Damian Obadiki had nothing to say. A reporter from one of Lagos's major blogs, sensing the story of the year, shouted from the back, "Mr. Obadiki, are those your children? Did you divorce your wife while she was pregnant?" The question was absurd. The timeline didn't match. But logic doesn't matter when scandal is in the air. The whispers became murmurs. The murmurs became loud conversations. Guests pulled out phones, checking Instagram, searching for stories, posting updates in real time. Nkechi turned to Damian, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. "You told me she couldn't conceive," she hissed, loud enough for the closest tables to hear. "You said she was barren. You said you waited 7 years for nothing. Yet she's standing here with 3 children while you couldn't even make one. Nkechi, wait." Damian reached for her arm, but she jerked away. "Don't touch me." She stood up, yanking off her engagement ring and throwing it at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the table. "You made me look like a fool. You made me the other woman in a story where you were the problem all along." She grabbed her dress, ready to storm off, then turned back one more time. "And you know what's worse? She looks happier than I ever could with you." The ballroom erupted. Some guests tried to calm Nkechi. Others surrounded Damian, asking questions he couldn't answer. Mama Damian sat motionless, her face a portrait of shock and shame. The carefully orchestrated celebration had collapsed into chaos in less than 5 minutes. Lilian turned to leave, Henry and her sons beside her. As she walked back toward the exit, she heard running footsteps. Damian had left his bride, his wedding, his guests, and was chasing her into the corridor. "Lilian, please." His voice cracked. "I need to explain." She stopped, but didn't turn around fully. "There's nothing to explain, Damian. Life explained it for both of us. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Those doctors, they never tested me properly. I had myself checked last month, preparing for marriage, and—" He pulled a crumpled paper from his inner pocket with shaking hands. A medical report. "It's me. It was always me. My sperm count is... I'm the one who..." He couldn't finish. Lilian finally turned to face him. For a moment she saw not the man who humiliated her, but the broken boy standing in ruins of his own making. "I know," she said quietly. "You knew?" His eyes widened. "No, but I know now, and it doesn't change anything. I destroyed you. I destroyed us. I let them tell me you were worthless. And I believed it because it was easier than facing the truth." Tears ran down his face, smearing against his expensive tuxedo. Is there any way you can forgive me?" Lilian looked at her 3 sons, at Henry waiting patiently, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her worst nightmare. "I forgave you a long time ago, Damian," she said, and she meant it. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back. It means I'm free to move forward." She knelt down to her son's level. "Say goodbye to Mr. Obadike, boys." The 3 children, innocent and perfect, waved tiny hands. "Bye-bye," they chorused. Damian broke. He fell to his knees in that elegant corridor, surrounded by gold and marble and the ruins of his pride. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Lilian stood, took Henry's arm, and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear the chaos still unfolding in the ballroom. Nkechi's family demanding answers, guests gossiping with glee, photographers capturing every angle of Damian's spectacular fall from grace. As they stepped outside into the legless afternoon sun, one of her sons tugged her dress. "Mama, why is that man crying?" Lilian lifted her child into her arms. "Because, my love, he finally learned that a woman's worth isn't measured by her womb. It's measured by her heart." They drove away in the white Rolls-Royce, leaving behind the wedding that would be talked about in Lagos society for years to come. Not because of its grandeur, but because of the moment a humble woman reminded a proud man that true wealth has nothing to do with money. In the weeks that followed, Damian's empire began to crumble. Investors who heard the wedding story questioned his judgment. Business partners whispered about karma. Nkechi left him, taking half his reputation with her. Mama Damian, humiliated beyond recovery, retreated to her village and never mentioned grandchildren again. Meanwhile, Lily's taste of home expanded into international markets. Lilian and Henry bought a seaside mansion where their boys could grow up hearing waves instead of gossip. And every night before bed, Lilian thanked God not for revenge, but for redirection. True wealth isn't counted in bank accounts or measured in square footage. It lives in the hearts that choose forgiveness over bitterness, in the hands that rebuild after betrayal, and in the quiet strength of those who rise when the world expects them to break. Lilian didn't need revenge. Life gave her justice wrapped in grace. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that their worth was never up for debate. This is Elmerum Stories, where love teaches us what money never can. Go watch the next story.